I will defeat you and feed your head to the birds of the air. What was he doing? Calling in victory, calling in favor. He reached down and picked up a smooth stone, put the rock in his slingshot. When he slung it, I can imagine it hit Goliath between the eyes, knocked him unconscious. David went over, took Goliath's own sword, and finished him off. When you face challenges, it's so important what you're saying. David could have looked at Goliath and said, King Saul was right. What was I thinking? I'll never defeat him. I'm sure those thoughts came to his mind, but he understood this principle, that what he spoke out, he was calling in. He knew if he spoke the negative, he was calling in defeat, limitations, weaknesses. That's why he stayed on the offensive. I will defeat you. When you face an illness, you need to declare, I will defeat this cancer. I will live and not die. You have to call in that healing. It doesn't say, let the weak think I'm strong. Well, Joel, I believe I'm healed. That's important, but believing alone is not enough. Take the next step and declare, I am healed. I am whole. Perhaps you're in a situation like David, where the odds are all against you. It's easy to get discouraged, talk about how bad it is. No, more than ever, you need to start calling in victory, calling in breakthroughs, calling in suddenlies. Father, you said, when darkness overtakes the righteous, light will come bursting in. I know one touch of your favor can suddenly turn this around. So I call my business blessed. I call myself free from this addiction. I call my children serving God. I call in abundance. I call in healing. I call in breakthroughs. Don't complain about not having it. Start calling it in. Declare what God says about you. Well, Joel, what if I call it and it doesn't come? Then keep calling. When my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer back in 1981, do you know how many times I heard her say, I am healed, I am free from this cancer? Thousands of times. The first couple of years when she said it, it seemed just the opposite. You would look at her and think, you're not healed. You don't look well. But when you keep calling in healing, keep calling in freedom, keep calling in abundance, what you're calling is on the way. May not have happened yet, but there will be a time where you see what you've been saying. Now, almost 40 years later, my mom is still healthy and whole. But don't be discouraged by what's not changing. Let that challenge you to call it in even stronger. God is faithful to what He promised. When you're calling in what He has spoken over you, you can rest assured it is on the way. This is what I had to do. When my father went to be with the Lord and I stepped up to pastor the church, I was afraid and intimidated. I had never ministered before. Every thought told me how it wasn't going to work out, how I didn't have the training, how nobody was going to listen. I was tempted to verbalize my fear and talk about how I felt unqualified, but I did what I'm asking you to do. All through the day, I felt the negative, but I said the positive. Under my breath, I was constantly saying, I am strong in the Lord. I can do all things through Christ. I am equipped. I am empowered. I am anointed. At that time, what I was saying, none of it felt like it was true. For months, even the first couple of years, I was still insecure, still afraid, not sure if I could do it. But I kept calling in courage, calling in favor, calling in the anointing. Today, 20 years later, I am what I call myself. I'm asking you to start calling in what you want to be. If you're intimidated like I was, then call in courage. I am strong. I am well able. Don't go the next 20 years calling in the negative. Put your faith out there. Call in greatness. Call in new levels. Call in your dreams. Call in your gifts. You've heard the line from the movie, if you build it, they will come. God is saying, if you'll call it, it will come. If you'll call yourself blessed, blessings will come. If you'll call yourself healed, healing will come. If you'll call your children fulfilling their destinies, their destiny will come. Numbers chapter 13. Moses sent 12 men to spy out the promised land. After 40 days, 10 of them came back and told Moses how it was an amazing land, more than they ever imagined. The clusters of grapes were so large, it took 2 people to carry them. They had struggled all those years out in the desert where it was hot and dusty, limited resources. Now they had finally made it next door to the land flowing with milk and honey. It was a land flowing with resources. And God had already promised that He was going to give them the land. He was going to defeat the enemy. They just had to go in and take it. But these 10 spies went on to say, Moses, the people are huge. They are so powerful, we will never defeat them. We felt like grasshoppers compared to them. They felt weak, but instead of calling themselves strong, they called themselves weak. God said He would give them the victory, but they called themselves defeated. God can call you one thing, but if you call yourself something different, you can override what God says. Not because we're that powerful, but God works where there's faith. God calls you blessed. But if you go around saying, I'm not blessed, I can't get ahead, I never get any good breaks, what you're calling in will override what God promised. God said you have been fearfully and wonderfully made. He calls you confident, secure, well able. But if you say, I'm not that talented, I'm not as smart as my sister, I don't have a good personality, what you're calling in will override what God has spoken. If you're going to become who you were created to be, you have to get in agreement with God. Don't cancel out the amazing plan He has for your life by calling in the wrong things. Like with the Israelites, there are blessings, good breaks, healing, freedom that God has already promised to give you. He didn't say if you're strong enough, if you know the right people, if you don't have any opposition. None of that is a condition for what God promised. He's going to give you the land, give you the spouse, give you the healing, give you that house that you're believing